Good to see you again. This is Thomas Wittig, and we are having another episode of the Idea Cast. Our topic today is how to set smart objectives for your marketing team and your external agency or agencies that you may want to work with. Today, I'm going to show you the key concepts about smart objectives, but also I will give you an update on some new tools. So there's a bunch of worksheets that you can use, the goal template, a goal alignment template, and how to map the goals to your marketing funnel, and also an inspiration about how you could set up performance tracking, and of course a checklist. Now, this topic is really about achieving your strategic objectives, right? Because as your organization is growing, as your marketing team is growing, and you're engaging more and more people and agencies, it's important that you are all pulling in the right direction. And one way to achieve that is, of course, to set smart objectives so that you can really drive for more of a predictable performance, because you want to achieve a certain outcome. You want to close a strategic gap or attain a growth targets, etc. And last but not least, this is also about systematic improvement, data-driven improvement. So using the analytics, using the signals that you get from your campaigns and your processes, and bring that together in a meaningful way. Because let's face it, if you have a team growing from 1 person to 10 to 100 and more people, then the question is, how do you keep everybody aligned, and how do you make sure that every single contribution is adding up at the end of the day? And one thing is that we have to keep in mind, setting goals and achieving strategic objectives and setting targets is not about activity. It's about the outcome, of course. So before I get started on this, while this gets a little bit into some technical topics about how to use your spreadsheet, etc., we shouldn't forget, and we should keep in mind that setting goals is first and foremost a dialogue with an agreement and a commitment. That's the most important thing when we talk about goal setting, of course. It's not about the tools and templates. It's about the interpersonal conversation and the team dialogue, the strategic dialogue within your marketing team, your leadership team, what your objectives are and what the key strategies and tactics are, how to use them. But today we will narrow in a little bit more on the smart objectives. So you probably heard the term, but when you ask people around you, what does it actually mean, smart objectives, and you ask 10 people, you probably get 20 different opinions. So let's get us grounded first. The S in SMART stands for specific. So you want to make sure that it's very specific what you are agreeing, what you are committing to. And then M stands for measurable. A stands for, in my definition, for achievable, but also for accountable. So it's important to understand who should be accountable for which part of a goal, especially if you have a larger goal that you try to address and you break it down into manageable or achievable chunks. Who is then accountable for which part, and how does it all add up? R stands for realistic. It's good to have aggressive goals and make big bets on your targets and your programs, but it also has to be realistic. If it's not realistic, you introduce frustration and sarcasm into the organization. But if you have a reasonably realistic and aggressive goal, that what we call typically a stretch goal, that keeps people thinking outside of the box, so to speak, outside of the common way of doing things. And T stands for timely. So every goal should also have a time frame tied around it. Now, sounds basic, sounds easy, doesn't it? But I can tell you from all the strategic reviews and marketing and operations reviews and the SEO audits that I'm doing with companies, this is not commonplace. This is not common sense everywhere. So people are still trying to make their way through the maze of marketing tools and strategies and tactics. And when you take a look at the framework of goals and objectives, it doesn't hang together. So no surprise that there are surprises and unfavorable surprises at the end of the day. Now, when we talk about goal alignment, this is the second point. Goal alignment, what we want to do, what you want to strive for is to align the goals with your with the strategic outcomes that you envision, that you have agreed to or committed to, and of course with your marketing funnel. Now, you may start with a potential audience, potential group of customer, target group of customer, or a segment, or even a cohort in your audience. And at the end of the day, on the other side of the spectrum, you want to monetize your efforts, and you want to sell product, a service, or a subscription. Now, in between, there's a what we call the marketing funnel. So it starts with your ads, for example, or your content showing up organically in the search appearances. So first of all, we need to know how many searches are there in a month. So what's the demand side? Then you would lead people to a landing page. They might engage in a trial, but could of course leave the trial. That's actually very common. But for those who like your offer, they would convert and start paying you a subscription or a one-time fee. But also these customers, of course, can churn away. Now, the next thing we need to acknowledge here is, of course, that there are different key performance indicators along this journey. So, for example, starting at the upstream part of the funnel, the top end of the funnel, you're very much looking at the click-through rate. So people watching your advertisement or see your links in the search engine research pages, and then they're clicking on it and starting the conversion. Then you go downstream, you're more worried about conversion and then retention and also monetization of your cohorts, of your target group. And then as your team is growing and you're not doing everything by yourself, you distribute the labor, of course. You distribute the responsibility. So you might, for example, engage an agency upstream and driving a lot of traffic to your pages. So there's a good reason to do that if you work with somebody who's specialized on search engine marketing, on keyword optimization, etc. That's something you could outsource, for example, especially if you have to constantly update your keywords. So if it's a repetitive task, that's a good candidate for outsourcing work, and then you can focus more on the core of product development, developing your offerings, or other parts of the marketing mix. Then moving downstream, the search engine optimization expert would be responsible for example, on-page SEO and making sure that you have a great landing page and it has all the elements that make customers to convert and join in a trial. And then further down, when it comes to converting into paying customers, of course, you need to have a good product market fit, because that's the latest point when customers really decide, okay, this is something for me or not. That's really what we talk about in terms of product market fit. And here, it's of course not responsibility of the agency, but more of the product manager or product development manager and the customer success team when it comes to conversion and retention, of course. And typically the marketing or sales and marketing manager owns the revenue piece. But as a sales and marketing manager, I cannot say, okay, I'm giving everybody the same goal, and our goal is to increase revenue by a factor of X. Then typically nothing really gets done. So you have to break it down and make it very specific. And that's what we mean by smart objectives. So I'm giving you an example here. This is what I would call a smart objective. It has all the elements of a smart objective. So the objective is to increase traffic to your landing page by 50%. And you could give that goal to your let's say your person who's responsible on your marketing team, or even make an agreement with your outsourced agency, for example. And you very clearly specify what's the metric, what is the current performance, where do you want to take it, what is the time frame for it, and how do you agree on reporting standards. And one thing I can recommend right away is to use standard reports, for example, in Google Analytics or other analytic platforms. So make it measurable, make it reportable, and so that everybody is basically looking at the same song sheet. Now, in this case, why is this specific and measurable? Well, it's very specific to a part of your value creation process, and it's also measurable. So you have very clear indicators in terms of the metrics and the reports. And I would say it's fairly achievable. It doesn't sound like an outrageous, unachievable goal. And it's also realistic. So you have a quarter to increase your page visits per day. And now keep in mind, this is an improvement goal. So you're not starting from zero. And secondly, you are improving here a rate, a flow of customers to your web page, right? So the agency is not entirely responsible for the entire process, the end-to-end process, but for a very specific part. And what you want to make sure is that the dependencies in the teams, of course, are understood. Okay, second advice I can give is regarding setting performance incentives. So now, generally, what you want to do is to reward superior performance and be very strict on the non-performance part and allocate the resources and incentives according to performance. So if a campaign is performing well, if, let's say, a vendor shows performance, then you can say, okay, we're going all in with our budget. Or otherwise, if performance is substandard, you could say, okay, this is obviously not working. We're reallocating, we're shifting gears now. And so in our little example, we were shooting here for 150 visitors per day, for example. So we would say this is the on-target performance within a range, of course. So it's not an exact science, but if you're in a certain range, you would say, okay, goal accomplished, and that's good. But everything below that is a non-performance and should not continue and probably not get any additional performance. But if you say, well, if we exceed that target, and if you really work very smart and hard on the objective, we're exceeding the target, then we would reward the performance. So we would establish, let's say, a kicker where we say, in addition to the normal fees that we have agreed, we would increase the fees if you exceed certain thresholds. So that's something I've put together this in a very simple spreadsheet that you can actually download. Now then, during the campaigns and during your fiscal year or your performance cycle, you may want to make sure that you have the ongoing conversation about how things are going. It could be on a daily basis, weekly or monthly basis. So for the things that have to change fairly frequently, for example, reviewing your search engine results and your landing pages and your keyword performance, you want to do that at least on a weekly basis. And in order to do that, you put the goals together. So here's basically a goal sheet, a template for a goal sheet. Again, that's also for download in the download area. And what you want to make sure here is if you're working in a company where you're allocating, for example, incentives like bonus to people, to the people in marketing, sales, and customer success, you want to make sure that the goals are very specific and very well defined, and they also have a weighting so that you articulate which goal is more important than the other. So, for example, here in this case, you see that one goal is to reduce churn of paying customers by 80% in a certain time frame. Now, actually, reducing the goal is more important. It's twice as important as knowing what the key drivers are. Knowing the key drivers is important, so you may want to ask for that as well, so that you see what the next steps are, so that you can literally walk down what we call the Pareto chart of improvement targets. Yeah. Then you want to make sure that people understand where they're actually trending in terms of the performance, if they're on target or off target. And so that's the attainment here of the goal. And then add little trend lines, for example. So you can see on one view here, actually, what is happening. So in which area are we on track? How are we trending? Is there any need for me to make adjustment? If not, then just get out of the way of people and let them do the job. But if you see a red flag, then you want to drill in. You want to ask the right questions. And that's a topic for another webcast when I'm going to talk about how to review projects, how to review marketing projects and campaigns. So Now you probably again think, okay, this is common sense, and you're absolutely right. This is common sense, but again, how many teams, how many people in the organization do we know that have not implemented that or not following through on this very simple framework? So it's important that you embed that into your ongoing management process and into your activities. So let me mention some of the tools that you can use. I mentioned the worksheets and a checklist. So here's a checklist that you can read. I'm not going to read the 10 points here, but I'm giving you basically the key steps that you need to keep in mind. This is subject for discussion, again, in our IdeaCast briefing and coaching series. This is topics where you can ask questions, so use the forum for that or the Facebook group. And there are worksheets, and these are also available for download right from the resource center. So the goal template, the tracking template, the example how you map in the, let's say, imaginary conversion flow, how you map the goals to the conversion flow and make sure that you articulate who's accountable. And here's also a little worksheet that you can adopt to your performance incentive scenario, for example. So all of these are available for download. And in an earlier webcast, I also mentioned a simulation tool. You can also use this in order to get a better sense in how different goals and how performance scenarios play out. This is a management flight simulator using system dynamics simulation that I've put together. And here you can work with different parameters. And this is especially useful if you have for example, a debate where you cannot agree on what's happening if you're moving the certain dial. So should you invest more in, let's say, initial advertising or in retention marketing and so on. So this gives you a better feeling and a better sense in terms of the system dynamics that are typically in play. Now, it's not meant to be a specific planning tool, but it's more an let's say an exploration tool, a learning tool. So all of these are available for download. And let me conclude today by saying, first of all, make sure that you have SMART objectives. You're setting the SMART objectives and that this is part of the discussion, not only at the beginning of the campaign or your engagement, but also throughout the process and at the very end when it comes to making a conclusion about what the performance looked like. And that typically ties back to compensation, promotion, and other forms of recognition, of course. Secondly, align your goals with your strategies and your strategic outcomes that you are driving for, and make sure that you set the accountabilities right. If you just communicate the goal and say our goal is to grow, that's really meaningless. So nobody can do anything with that. Everybody would do their own thing, and then at the end of the day, you probably cannot bring things together. Number 3, use analytics wherever you can. So now we're living in a time where you go to a digital marketing agency, and you have a marketing budget to spend. You can be very specific because digital marketing is so measurable that you can be very specific what you are expecting, and also you can use the analytics to monitor performance. So ask for the right reports and make sure that you are clear on what you are looking for. So what constitutes success and which reports are you looking at from your CRM, from Google Analytics, and so on, in order to assess performance. And number 4, make sure that your resource allocation, for example, your budget, but also your incentives and rewards, follow performance, right? So as a manager, you want to make sure that you differentiate and that differentiate between low and high performance, and you want to allocate the resources towards higher performance. Even though it's a tough thing to do, sometimes you have to cut as many times as you are starting new initiatives, of course. So all of this is available in the IdeaCast Resource Center. This is just one of the weekly episodes that we have, very short, bite-sized, that you can actually share with your team. So I'd be very happy if you like the content, if you found some value in this, share it with your team. And also, if you want to stay on top of the upcoming replace, for example, subscribe to the channel. But on the website, there's actually the subscribe button to the live webinar, because here in the live webinar, we are usually having a Q&A for those who want to ask live questions or give a feedback on some of the key strategies and tactics that they have tried. So stay connected. Here are our social properties. If you have a question, just submit it within the briefing center, and I'll pick it up from there, or on the Facebook group. So that's typically a good channel where I'm picking up topics, and these are mapped out typically 2-3 months in advance. So that's it for today, and I want to thank you and wish you good luck in creating